My name is Audrey Patterson. I'm 30 years old, and I own a tech startup that I built from nothing. It's not a billion-dollar empire. It's not the kind of company that gets flashy magazine covers or luxury interviews. But it's real, it's profitable, and it's mine. I live comfortably. I own 2 houses. One I live in, one I rent out. I'm not reckless with money. I don't buy things to impress people, but I sleep at night without worrying about bills. Everything I have, I built myself. And maybe that's why this hurts more than it should. Because in my family, I was never the investment. That title belonged to my younger brother, Mason. Mason Patterson, the golden son. Growing up, nothing seemed unfair at first. If I got a toy, Mason got something similar. If I had a birthday party, so did he. My parents were affectionate, structured, traditional. My father was a reserved, decisive man, the kind who believed success had to be loud to be real. My mother was softer, emotional, but easily swayed by whoever seemed to need her most. And Mason always seemed to need more. Everything changed when he started school. Mason wasn't just smart, he was magnetic. Teachers adored him. Classmates followed him. He had that easy charm that made people believe he was destined for something extraordinary. I was smart too, but I was quiet. And quiet children rarely become family legends. When Mason wanted to learn French, my parents enrolled him in the best language institute in the city. When he wanted to attend an international summer camp, they didn't hesitate. When he developed an interest in piano, they bought him a brand new upright and hired a private tutor. I remember standing in the hallway the day the piano arrived. The delivery men carried it carefully, like it was something sacred. I had asked for art classes that same year. My mother had smiled gently. Public school already offers art, Audrey. There's no need to spend extra money. That was the first time I noticed the difference. Not in gifts, in investment. By high school, the gap was undeniable. Mason wanted to attend a prestigious private academy. Tuition was astronomical. My father paid without negotiation. When I asked about transferring to a better school too, my mother placed her hand on mine and said softly, "Public schools are perfectly fine. You're strong, Audrey. You'll succeed anywhere." Strong. That word followed me my entire life. Strong meant you don't need us. At 17, I discovered programming. It felt like unlocking a secret language. I wanted to take a professional online development course. It cost a fraction of what they had spent on Mason's extracurriculars. My father barely looked up from the newspaper. Programming can be self-taught. Don't waste money. That summer, while Mason practiced piano in air-conditioned comfort, I sat at my desk with a secondhand laptop, learning from free forums and outdated tutorials. No mentor, no financial backing, just stubbornness. And somewhere between debugging errors at 2 a.m., I realized something painful. My parents weren't betting on me. They were protecting their investment. And I wasn't it. I never blamed Mason. He didn't force them. He just accepted what was given. And I stopped expecting anything. After college, I worked for 2 years straight. No vacations, no luxury purchases. By 25, I had saved enough to launch a small tech startup. But to scale properly, I needed about $50,000. I debated for weeks before asking. I wasn't asking for a gift. I was prepared to sign contracts, pay interest, treat it as a formal loan. I remember sitting across from my parents at the dining table, presenting my business model like I was pitching to investors. Within 5 minutes, my father cut me off. No, too risky. He didn't ask about the numbers. He didn't examine my projections. He didn't care. If Mason dreamed, it was visionary. If I calculated, it was reckless. I nodded. And left. But that night, alone in my apartment, I allowed myself one moment of weakness. I cried. Not because of the money, but because for the first time I knew with certainty they never believed in me. So I built it anyway. Slowly, painfully. Every contract negotiated personally. Every employee carefully chosen. There were nights I fell asleep at my desk. Days I questioned everything. But I never quit. Because if I failed, it would confirm what they already thought. And I refused to give them that satisfaction. By 29, my company was stable, profitable, respected in our niche. I bought my first house. Then my second. No help. No inheritance. Just discipline. And Mason? At 23, he opened a European-style cafe. My parents invested over $100,000. Prime downtown location. Imported furniture. Custom branding. 8 months later, it shut down. The market is tough, my mother sighed. You deserve another chance, my father told him. At 25, Mason entered the fashion industry. Another $50,000 disappeared. 6 months. Gone. He blamed suppliers, trends, timing. Never himself. And my parents? They never stopped believing. That's when I understood something terrifying. They didn't reject me because I lacked potential. They rejected me because I didn't fit their fantasy. Mason was their dream. I was their insurance. And then, 1 year ago, everything shattered. 1 year ago, I drove back to my parents' neighborhood without calling ahead. I told myself it was spontaneous, casual, a daughter stopping by. But maybe some part of me already felt that something was wrong. Their street looked the same: trimmed hedges, familiar mailboxes, the faint scent of jasmine drifting from Mrs. Halbert's yard. And then I saw it. A brand new black BMW parked in front of my parents' house. Not leased, not secondhand. New, shining like a trophy. I slowed the car instinctively. My parents were not extravagant people. They clipped coupons, compared electricity plans. My mother reused gift wrap. So where had this come from? The front door opened, and my mother stepped out with the brightest smile I'd seen in years. "Audrey, you're here. Mason just bought a new car. Isn't it beautiful?" I stepped out slowly. "A BMW?" I asked. She nodded proudly. "It's important for business. Image matters." Image. That word again. I forced a smile and followed her inside. That's when I saw the documents. A stack of papers spread across the dining table. Official, stamped, heavy. Something in my chest tightened. I walked closer. Mortgage agreement. Loan amount, $500,000. Collateral, 80% of the house's value. I felt the blood drain from my face. "You mortgaged the house?" I asked quietly. My father, sitting at the table, stiffened. "It's just a temporary measure." Temporary. I picked up the document. $500,000. "You used the house as collateral?" My voice was steady, but my hands were not. My mother avoided my eyes. "We wanted to give Mason a real chance." "A real chance?" I repeated. "What about Grandpa's inheritance?" I asked. "The savings?" Silence. Then my mother whispered, "It's gone." Gone. I looked back at the window, at the BMW. "You burned through the inheritance, and now you're risking the house?" My father's jaw tightened. He needed the car. "For what?" "For credibility," he snapped. "No one takes you seriously if you show up to investor meetings in an old sedan." I stared at him. "So you drained the savings, bought him a luxury car, and mortgaged your home for another startup?" "It's different this time," my mother insisted quickly. That sentence felt like déjà vu. How many times had I heard it? I swallowed hard. "If Mason fails again," I said slowly, "you will lose everything." My mother's eyes flashed. "You're jealous." I blinked. "What?" "You've always been competitive with your brother," she said. "You can't stand seeing him succeed." I laughed. It wasn't amused. It wasn't kind. It was hollow. "You think I'm jealous of someone who has burned through 6 figures of this family's money without taking responsibility once?" My father slammed his hand on the table. "Enough. You already have everything. You don't understand what it's like to need support." I froze. "Need support?" "When I was 25, I said quietly, I asked you for a $50,000 loan. Remember?" No one answered. "You rejected me in 5 minutes. Didn't even look at my projections." "That was different," my father muttered. "How?" My voice cracked despite my effort to control it. "Because I'm not your golden dream?" The silence was suffocating. My father stood up abruptly and pointed toward the door. "If you're only here to criticize, then leave." My mother didn't stop him. She didn't defend me. I placed the mortgage documents back on the table. "I'm not criticizing," I said softly. "I'm warning you." And then I walked out. On the drive home, my hands trembled on the steering wheel. Not from anger, from inevitability. I called Mason. He answered on the second ring. "Hey, sis." "Mason," I said, trying to keep my tone calm. "What are you doing?" "What do you mean?" "You convinced them to mortgage the house." He sighed dramatically. "They offered." "That's not the point." "You don't get it," he said sharply. "This is a real opportunity. Real estate development is exploding right now." "With borrowed money," I replied, "with their house on the line." "You're always like this," he scoffed. "You act like you're smarter than everyone." I closed my eyes. "I'm scared for them." He laughed. "You're scared I'll surpass you." The words hit harder than I expected. "What?" "You already have your company, your houses, your little empire," he said bitterly. "Now that I finally have something big, you can't stand it." My chest tightened. "Is that really what you think of me?" "What else would it be?" For a moment, I considered arguing, explaining, begging him to see logic. But I heard it in his voice. Certainty. He believed his own narrative. "If that's how you see me," I said quietly, "then I have nothing else to say." And I hung up. A week passed. No calls. No messages. Then suddenly my mother called. "We'd like you to come over for dinner," she said gently. I hesitated. After the way things ended, I hadn't expected reconciliation so soon. But despite everything, they were still my parents. So I went. When I arrived, Mason was already there. The atmosphere felt staged, calmer than it should have been. My father cleared his throat. Audrey, he began, we were harsh last time. My mother nodded. And Mason has something to say? Mason scratched the back of his neck. Sorry, he muttered. I was hot-headed. I stared at him. An apology from Mason was rare. Suspiciously rare. Maybe they had finally realized how reckless this was. Maybe this dinner was about healing. For a brief, dangerous second, I felt hope. And then my father said, Audrey, you own 2 houses now, right? Something inside me went cold. Yes, I replied slowly. My mother smiled, that same soft, persuasive smile from childhood. Mason is moving into real estate development. He needs a respectable property to build credibility. I didn't speak. If you could transfer one of your houses to him, she continued gently, it would help him tremendously. The room felt smaller, the air thinner. So that was it. The apology, the invitation, the dinner, all a setup. I looked at them, at my parents, at my brother, and without hesitation I said, no. The silence that followed was immediate. Heavy, explosive. The silence after I said no didn't feel like ordinary silence. It felt like betrayal, but not mine. My mother blinked first. What do you mean, Audrey? She asked softly, as if I had misheard the request. I mean, I'm not giving Mason my house, I replied calmly. I'm not insane. The air in the room shifted instantly. My father set his chopsticks down with a sharp clack. The sound echoed louder than it should have. You have 2 houses, he said, his voice low and controlled. Mason needs one. I let out a dry laugh. So what are you saying? That I should sacrifice property I built myself because he needs an image? It's not sacrifice, my mother insisted quickly. It's family support. Family support. The irony almost choked me. How many times, I asked slowly, have you supported Mason financially? No one answered. How many times has he succeeded? My father's jaw tightened. He hasn't failed, he snapped. He just hasn't found the right opportunity yet. And you believe this is it? I pressed. Yes. That unwavering certainty. That blind faith. I leaned back in my chair, studying them carefully. When I was 25, I said quietly, I asked you for $50,000. Just a loan. You rejected me immediately. That's in the past, my father cut in. It's not, I said, because the pattern hasn't changed. My mother's voice trembled slightly now. You already have everything, Audrey. Mason is still building his future. Everything. As if I hadn't clawed my way to it alone. My father's patience snapped. You're jealous, he said bluntly. You're afraid he'll surpass you. That word again. Jealous. I stood up slowly. No, I said, my voice steady. I'm just not stupid. The table trembled as my father slammed his fist down. If you walk out that door, don't come back. For a moment, the little girl inside me hesitated. The one who had waited for approval. For acknowledgement. But she was gone now. I guess this is goodbye, I said quietly. And I walked out. Months passed. We didn't speak. Not a call. Not a message. I focused on my company. Expansion. Contracts. Growth. And in the quiet moments, I told myself I had done the right thing. Then, one afternoon, my phone buzzed. It was Ethan, a colleague from the real estate industry. Audrey, he said carefully, have you heard about Mason? My stomach tightened. No. His company filed for bankruptcy. I closed my eyes. What happened? He bought high. Market corrected. Investors pulled out. He panicked and liquidated at a loss. The mortgage money. Gone. And the BMW? I asked quietly. Sold 2 months ago. He was trying to stay afloat. Of course he was. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel vindicated. Just empty. Because I knew what came next. The calls started that night. My mother. I didn't answer. Then my father. Then Mason. Then all 3 again. Voicemails flooded in. Audrey, please pick up. Our family needs you. Don't abandon us. I listened to every single one and said nothing. The next morning, I stepped out of my house and froze. They were standing at my gate. All 3 of them. They looked smaller. Mason's shoulders were slumped. Dark circles under his eyes. No tailored suit, no confidence. My mother's hair looked grayer than I remembered. My father, once so rigid and imposing, looked 10 years older. My father cleared his throat. Audrey, he said hoarsely, we were wrong. I crossed my arms. About what? My mother stepped forward. We lost the house. The words hung in the air. I didn't react. We thought the project would recover, she continued. It didn't. And now? I asked. My father swallowed. We need your help. Of course. How? I asked, though I already knew. You could sell one of your houses, my father said quickly, or your company. I stared at him. My company? If we can pay off the debt, we can save the house, he rushed on. We can start over. Start over. They had refused to lend me $50,000. Now they wanted me to dismantle everything I had built. I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was absurd. You kicked me out, I said calmly. You told me not to come back." "That was anger," my mother pleaded. "This," I gestured toward them, "is consequence." Mason stepped forward finally. "We're family," he muttered weakly. I looked at him, really looked at him. For the first time, he didn't look like the golden sun. He looked like a man who had never learned to stand alone. "I warned you," I said quietly. No one responded. I stepped back toward my door. "I'm not selling anything." "Audrey," my mother cried, "get out of my house." The words came out colder than I intended, but I didn't take them back. They stood there for a moment longer. Then slowly they left. A month later, the bank seized their house. They had nowhere to go. At first, they stayed with acquaintances, then cheap motels, then shelters. I told myself it wasn't my responsibility. I told myself this was justice. But at night, I still thought about them. 3 months passed, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't silence one uncomfortable truth. They were still my parents. For 3 months, I did nothing. At least that's what I told myself. I didn't call. I didn't visit. I didn't transfer money. But I watched. Not directly, not obviously. Through distant relatives. Through quiet inquiries. Through industry whispers. They moved from a modest motel to a cheaper one. Then from that to a shelter on the east side of the city. The same parents who once hosted holiday dinners in a warm, well-lit dining room were now lining up for donated meals. And Mason, the future real estate mogul, was applying for entry-level jobs. No one wanted him. Too many failed ventures. Too many unpaid debts. Too many burned bridges. The market has a memory. So do people. I told myself they needed to feel it, to understand what unchecked faith and reckless pride cost. But something about seeing my father, once composed, authoritative, reduced to silence in a shared shelter room. It unsettled me, not because I regretted my decision, but because consequences are never clean. They hurt everyone, including the person who enforces them. One evening, after closing a major contract that should have made me feel victorious, I sat alone in my living room. The house was quiet, perfectly furnished, tastefully decorated, stable, everything I had worked for. And yet I felt no satisfaction. Just a question. How long is enough? The next morning, I called my mother. She answered on the first ring. "Audrey?" Her voice cracked. "I want to see you," I said. There was a pause, a fragile, hopeful silence. Of course. When I walked into the shelter's small visitation room, I almost didn't recognize them. My father avoided eye contact. My mother's hands trembled slightly as she folded them in her lap. Mason sat in the corner, stripped of every ounce of arrogance. No designer watch. No expensive haircut. Just exhaustion. For a few minutes, no one spoke. The power dynamic had shifted completely. Finally, I broke the silence. "I'll rent a small house for you," I said calmly. My mother's head snapped up. "Really?" "Yes," I continued. "A modest place. Close enough to the city. 1 year." My father looked at me carefully. "And after a year? You're on your own." The hope in my mother's eyes flickered, but didn't disappear. "Mason has to get a job," I added firmly. "Any job. Stable income. No more startups. No more investors. No more image." Mason shifted in his seat. "I can still rebuild." "For once," my father interrupted sharply. We all froze. It was the first time I had seen him cut Mason off. "You will listen," he said, not looking at me, but at his son. The silence that followed was heavy, but different from before. Less defensive, more resigned. I continued. "If after 1 year you can support yourselves, good. If not, I will continue paying rent only for you." I nodded toward my parents. "But Mason will move out." Mason's jaw tightened. "You're abandoning me," he muttered. "No," I replied calmly. "I'm ending the cycle." My mother wiped her eyes. "We understand." For the first time in my life, they did. It has been a month since I moved them into the rental house. Small, clean, nothing luxurious, just enough. Mason works at a logistics warehouse now. Long shifts, physical labor. He comes home tired. He doesn't talk about million-dollar dreams anymore. My father has taken a part-time bookkeeping position. My mother cooks simple meals. They are quieter now, less certain, less proud, more human. And me? I don't visit often, not out of cruelty, but out of boundaries, because help without limits becomes dependency. And I refuse to be the next enabler in Mason's life. People often assume forgiveness means full restoration. It doesn't. Sometimes forgiveness means controlled distance. Sometimes love means allowing someone to experience the weight of their own decisions. I didn't save them immediately. I didn't rescue them at the first sign of collapse. I let them feel it, not because I'm heartless, but because without pain, nothing changes. After a year, if they stand on their own feet, I'll be glad. If they don't, I'll protect my parents. But Mason, he will finally have to become accountable for his own life. That is my final decision. So now I want to ask you, if you were in my position, would you have done the same? Or would you have walked away for good?